Okay, so I chose to do my project on one of my all-time favorite journalists, which is Walter Cronkite. So a little bit about his background information when he was a younger boy. Walter Leland Cronkite Jr. was born November 4th, 1916, in a very small town in Missouri. And even as a little kid, he always loved reading all different types of media, including books, newspapers, and even magazines. And he also played a really large role in his school newspapers. Then in 1927, he moved with his family to Houston, and there he worked on the school newspapers in both middle school and high school. After graduating, he studied political science at the University of Texas, and to help pay for his tuition, he actually worked as a correspondent for a Houston newspaper, which was the Houston Post. And in 1935, he left college to take a full-time position with the paper. And about his later life, in 1913, he left the Houston Post to become a news director for the United Press. And this was just a huge time in the United States history. A lot of people were struggling. This is when we entered World War II in 1941, and the United Press promoted Cronkite to the overseas war correspondent. There he covered all kinds of fighting in the North Atlantic. He worked in London, Russia, Germany, and North Africa, where he reported on German bombing raids and invasions. He even actually flew in the bombing raids over Germany, and in 1944 he reported on the Allies landing in the beaches of Normandy, France on D-Day. The picture I have there is of him reporting in Europe. I think it looks like after an air raid or something. After the war, he ended up staying in Europe to cover the Nuremberg trials and to help set up a lot of the UP bureaus. And then before returning to the United States, he actually served as the United Press bureau chief in Moscow. And with all the attention that he received from the United Press, Cronkite really sparked a lot of interest in the Columbia Broadcasting System, which we know now as CBS. Vice President Edward R. Murrow hired him in 1950 as the correspondent for the CBS television affiliate in Washington, D.C. So this was a huge deal for him. Throughout the 1950s, he hosted all different kinds of shows on TBS. The first one was You Are There, which was kind of an imaginary broadcast of historical events. He also had The Morning Show, which he co-hosted with a puppet named Charlemagne, and then he hosted a documentary series that was called The 20th Century. The interesting part was that he was working in a medium that he didn't really know a lot about. He had always just kind of been more of a radio reporter, but it didn't even really matter. He was a natural. He was really known for being very calm and just having an amazing ability to go on air without a whole lot of nervousness or preparation. In 1962, Walter Cronkite attained the position that he would become most famous for, which was the anchorman of the CBS Evening News. Soon after Cronkite took over from his predecessor, who was Douglas Edwards, it was then a 15-minute broadcast. The broadcast was expanded to 30 minutes, which made it the first half-hour nightly news show on the American network television. Walter Cronkite had multiple impacts on journalism, but here I'm only going to talk about really 4 of them. The first one was that he was really the first newscaster to really gain people's trust. When he was promoted and the evening news was extended from 15 to 30 minutes, making it the longest evening news show on TV. And this meant that people spent more time with Cronkite than they did with any other reporter. He reported on really critical points in U.S. history, which some of these included the landing on the moon, the shooting of JFK, and the Vietnam War. I actually have a quick clip I'll show you of him breaking the news about JFK being assassinated.
At the airport in Dallas, and throughout the streets of Dallas, the Dallas police had been augmented by some 400 policemen called in on their day off because there were some fears and concerns in Dallas that there might be demonstrations, at least, that could embarrass the president. Because it was only on October the 24th that our ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, was assaulted in Dallas, leaving a dinner meeting there. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
Okay, so you can see how his reactions, are just so true, and just people really like that about him, that, he just seemed like a normal guy. He became part of the family. And they did love him. In a national poll, he was actually voted the most trusted man in America. And it was even said that when Cronkite expresses his dismay for Vietnam, President Lyndon B. Johnson said that if I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America. And some think that Johnson's decision not to run again for re-election was a direct result of Cronkite's reporting. The next effect that I have is that he really influenced the basic format of evening news. Since the CBS Evening News was extended, it was now the longest and most popular news show at the time. With everybody watching it, it kind of acted as a model to the rest of the news world. In fact, CBS still uses his exact wording for the intro to their news today, which is, "This is CBS Evening News with, so-and-so, whoever's reporting." And with the amount of trust and following that Cronkite had, other anchors really looked to him as a role model. Everybody wanted to be just like Walter Cronkite. They wanted to be just as calm, cool, and collected as he was. And he was pretty much just seen as an example for everybody else. And then he also really set the bar for kind of the flow of the newscast, I guess you could say. Since CBS was so popular, other news affiliates tended to follow that flow of news, from world news to national to local. The next effect that I have is his critique of television, which is kind of surprisingly, Cronkite was actually very critical of television. He thought that as time went on, more reporters were just becoming victims of the media, and they were being more celebrity-like, and they didn't really think before they acted. He ended up saying in an essay that reporters need to take the time to think before they actually talk. He also felt that TV wasn't enough to get the basic news of the day. So Cronkite said that with a 30-minute news broadcast and 13 minutes of commercials, that only left about 17 minutes of actual news. And to him, he always thought that wasn't nearly enough for people to get to understand what was really going on in the world. He also really saw the limitations of TV. He knew that you can only get so much out of TV, and the broadcasted news could only give you, so much information. And in an interview, he was quoted saying that he wished he could end every broadcast saying to check your local papers for more details, but of course he didn't do that. And overall, he was just very pessimistic towards the future of journalism, which kind of, is still an issue today. There are a lot of critique of the field of journalism. And then the last impact that I have is School of Journalism. And one of the schools really recognized Cronkite for his skill and achievement. And in 1984, Arizona State University named their journalism program the Walter Cronkite School. And Cronkite always, he kind of did shape the way that people teach news now. He said that to be a good journalism program, you need to focus on the liberal arts, whereas, back in the day, they kind of focused more on the theoretical side of reporting and journalism. And he was also a big believer in learning a little bit about a lot of things. He thought that a good journalist was well-rounded in all areas of the job. And he said that they should be able to just go out and not need a lot of preparation and just do the newscast, which he was really good at this, so, it was kind of easy for him to say. About his final days, Cronkite finally resigned from his position at CBS in 1981 after spending 19 years as the show's anchor. It was a very emotional resignation, and the entire country watched his last broadcast. After resigning, he voiced a lot of PBS documentaries, and occasionally he did serve as a correspondent for CBS. He published his autobiography about his life in 1996, and he was also showered with many awards throughout his life. Some of the most notable ones were multiple Emmys, the Peabody Award, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was given to him by President Jimmy Carter in 1981. Cronkite died in 2008 in his home in New York, and although it was never really totally confirmed, it was said to be of cerebrovascular disease, and he was 92 when he died. Even though Walter Cronkite is gone, he's considered an American legacy in journalism. He really did just captivate the entire nation when he was reporting. People loved him and they trusted his stories during times in America's past that were really troubling for people. He also helped set the bar for newscasts today. Anchors really try to follow his character and personality, and all of them strive to reach a level of trust and dependency. in the American public that Cronkite had. Another thing he did was he got people thinking about the standards and ethics of reporting, which is a topic that continually is talked about and will probably even go up on the rise. His style and opinions on teaching have also inspired many journalism students and professors across the globe, especially at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona. Overall, Walter Cronkite was an amazing journalist that had a lasting impact on the field of journalism.